عامين أن اشكر لي ولوالديك إلي المصير.
And we have enjoined upon man care for his parents. His mother carried him, increasing her in weakness upon weakness, and his weaning is in 2 years. Be grateful to me and to your parents. To me is the final destination.
This Wednesday, join us on Radio Islam International for a special episode honoring the unsung heroines, the mothers of the pious. In this unique radio show, we'll explore the powerful influence of mothers who raised individuals of great faith, wisdom, and integrity. Hear inspiring stories of sacrifice, devotion, and the deep love that shaped spiritual leaders and change makers throughout history. Join us as we pay tribute to these remarkable women who, through their nurturing and guidance, played a pivotal role in the development of virtuous and pious individuals. Don't miss this chance to celebrate the quiet yet transformative power of motherhood only on Radio Islam, where faith, love, and legacy meet.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Radio Islam International on this Wednesday morning. The time is exactly 14 minutes past the hour of 9. And we are doing the topic of love your kids. This is the third season, season 3. We did season 1 and 2 where we discussed, the mothers of the pious, mothers of the Sahaba, mothers of, the very pious in Islam. We also did the mothers of the Imam, that is Imam Malik rahmatullah alayhi, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmatullah alayhi, Imam Shafi rahmatullah alayhi. We discussed the mothers of certain prophets also, and what the pivotal role they played in the upbringing. So now we're actually doing is season 3, and our introduction. We've seen that a lot of times people are really hard about Islamic principles and being strict and restricting children with building support without communicating and spending time and having a good relationship. So we have Malana Zahir Ahmed Ragi online. Malana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Malana. And we also take this opportunity of greeting all our listeners and viewers that have joined us on the various platforms.
Marana, coming to the third season of Love Your Kids, we see we're speaking about today's times, and a lot of times people are really hard about this Islamic principles and being strict and restricting children. And if you want them to love you, you want your children to love you, you want to love your children, and you want them to make dua for you, then we need to actually build a rapport, and we need to make them love Islam and not fear it. In today's time, we've seen how difficult this has actually become.
Yes, Marana. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And you have very correctly said that this is season 3, where inshallah we are going to dive into the climax of our discussion, and that is building good, sound relationships with our children. And having those relationships with our children will assist us and them to have an opportunity of becoming good, virtuous, positive, favorable members of communities and societies. And today, we started with this last week as an introduction to this season 3. A lot of the times people, as you've said, are really hard about certain Islamic principles, being strict, restricting children, and even building the rapport with our children without communicating with them correctly, without spending time with them. And this results in not having good relationships. So if you want our children to love us and make dua for us, then we need to build the right rapport, and we need to make them love Islam and not fear it. And we've mentioned some of this last week, and we'll just, as a recap basically, Maulana, that every time you interact with your kids, you have the choice of making emotional deposits. Because with each person that you speak, it's like a bank account. And every time you listen to them or compliment them, it's like you've made an emotional deposit. When you're reacting and you have the end in mind, if you recall, we spoke last week about have the end in mind. Begin with what you want to achieve. So you begin with the end in mind. So when you're reacting, you have that end in mind and think of how you want your kids to be. Then even if you steer out, if you steer out of line, which we normally will do, because we are living in a time where there are so many attractions, distractions, and we might forget the objective and the end of the line. And the beauty is that we can keep readjusting ourselves. And we gave the beautiful example last week that what would you guess a plane traveling from Johannesburg to Jeddah, for example, and it's most of the time on course. But sometimes it does go off course due to whatever reasons. But you have to keep in contact with your ground control. The pilot keeps control with the ground control, and the ground control continuously readjusting the pilot or the navigation to reach its destination. And that's what we need to do as parents. Even when we're driving our own cars, we have our Waze or Google Maps. Sometimes we go off track, but we do readjust. There are times when we overreact, when we lose our patience, but we have to keep thinking about what we want our children to achieve. What do you think was the attitude of these amazing examples of great women that we have given? Do we think that they felt so fed up and sick and tired of their kids? A lot of moms right now, unfortunately, have that approach, have that mentality. And what was amazing about the moms that we spoke of was that they saw the blessing they had and saw their children as an amana, as a trust. And they saw it was a responsibility. And they were appreciative of it and wanted to do the best that they could with this amana that they had. You find that there are so many people who perhaps are unable to have children. But those of us that have, we have to appreciate this amana that we have, and we will have a totally different attitude. You see them as a blessing. You see your kids as a blessing. You don't see your kids as a burden. And having the right attitude in everything, whether it's your business, whether it's your studies, whether it's your home, that is what is going to make you successful. If you take the example of a student that has a bad attitude, what are they going to achieve? They will not achieve anything. The same goes with parenting. If a parent feels fed up and tired, they're not going to be effective parents. How do you think we manage? And we need to manage our attitude. And this is what we had discussed last week, again as a recap. And I find that this is very profound example. It's through our self-talk. Self-talk is this internal discussion, internal dialogue that we have with ourselves. You know, we speak perhaps 600 words a minute. And whatever you say to yourself affects the way you feel. Whatever you say to yourself affects the way you feel. It affects your performance and what you achieve. And one of the first things we need to work on is our self-talk, especially as parents, especially in those moments when we become irritated. Because what goes on in your mind affects your behavior. And what is amazing is that there is so much of psychology embedded in the Quran and the Sunnah. It's just that unfortunately we don't look at the Quran and Sunnah. We don't ponder upon the ayat of the Quran Kareem. We do not reflect on how Allah Ta'ala addressed us and how Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam guided us in so many things. For instance, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala encourages us to have positive thoughts by placing emphasis on our intentions. if you have an intention to go out and feed the hungry and feed the poor, but you don't get to do it, Allah Ta'ala will reward you for your intention. So Allah Ta'ala encourages us to have positive thoughts because it affects our heart, which affects our behavior. Our thoughts affects our hearts. Our thoughts affects our emotional position, our emotional condition, and that eventually affects our behavior. Allah encourages us to have positive thoughts because it affects our behavior. When you have a positive attitude, it is important to be approaching and accepting. So you are able to be approachable. In fact, we can have an entire discussion just to be given on the aspect of having acceptance of the type of children you have, and for children to be acceptive of the types of parents they have, accepting your children, accepting their abilities, accepting their intelligence, accepting their looks. If you do this, you cannot imagine the results. And if you don't do this, it can be disastrous. But as we've said, Maulana, this is just an introduction. And inshallah, we will have an entire section as we go along with our discussion of building that relationship with our children, where we will discuss the aspects of acceptance.
100%. My second important note in our introduction of building our relations with our children is the aspect of temperament, of being approachable.
Subhanallah, yes, Maulana. To have the right temperament in your home as parents, so that your children feel comfortable with you, so that your children know that they can approach you. Being approachable means that you are smiling, you are happy, and your kids can run to you and share with you. But if you are someone who is continuously frowning, someone who is totally angry most of the time in your home, that is not being approachable. If you're not approachable, your kids are going to go somewhere else to get that acceptance. And there are parents that complain that their teenagers don't want to spend time with them. You have many a times parents discussing that our children don't want to spend time with us. These parents should be asking themselves, and that's what we spoke about, that self-talk. How do I make my children feel? When they with you, do you make them feel accepted? Do you make them feel loved? Because it is not what you say to people, but how you make them feel. If you make them feel special, they're going to enjoy, cherish spending time with you. We have to focus on having the right attitude with our children. And each of these mothers that we had given examples of in the past, and that was the reason why we chose to discuss this topic, this very important, significant topic, with examples of these mothers. We have to focus on having the right attitude with our children. And each of these mothers that we spoke of focused on building their children's self-esteem. Every one of us needs validation. And we gave the example of Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Subhanallah, imagine his mother asked him as a young boy, as a young person who was in his youth, to perform her own nikah when she remarried. This shows the approach that she instilled, the approach of having respect for your children. Every one of us needs validation. We need acceptance. And these moms gave their children that. Now, there are two kinds of validation: external validation and internal. What these moms, the examples that we had given is they gave their children internal validation. They made them feel so good about themselves that they relied on their own moral compass. They made their children feel so good about themselves that their kids, their children, who eventually became Imam Malik, Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and the various other great people that we spoke of, they relied on their own moral compass. That internal compass tells them that no matter what people say, I am going to do the right thing, because they don't need acceptance from society. Our children don't need acceptance from society. External validation is when you become very needy and you don't feel good until someone gives you a compliment. So if we have our own feelings of self-worth, we won't be needy of people around us. And that's so important in building the right approach, the right attitude. We must have our own feeling of self-worth. And if we have that, and we are able to develop that in our children, they won't need the people's validation around them. The other way of building self-esteem is to make positive statements to your children. Making positive statements. And I use this example of a ratio of 5-1. 1 negative comment with 5 positive comments. But if you are continuously giving your children negative comments, you are destroying their self-esteem. Let's think back to your last interaction with your kids and the ratio. What was the ratio of the last interaction of yours with your kids? We need to be aware of this in any relationship. If you give criticism, you need to be ready to dish out compliments. If you give criticism, you need to be able to, and you need to be ready to dish out compliments. You know, there was someone who had an exceptional daughter that happened to be a paraplegic, in the sense that only 2 fingers of hers worked. With those 2 fingers, she could not put it on herself. Her mom believed in her, kept inspiring her to work on the computer and do design. With these 2 fingers, she designed amazing things and she graduated. When you're building self-esteem, it is like constructing a building, and every positive word does like a brick, and criticism does what a bulldozer does. Every positive word of encouragement to your children is like that brick that you're building and constructing a building. But every criticism is like a bulldozer. So you build self-esteem. We have to validate our kids. Now, coming back to that ratio that I spoke about, 5-1. For every 1 criticism, make sure you give at least 5 compliments. And try to avoid criticism. Don't make fun of their bodies or their features or call them demeaning names. This has a damaging effect. It is so critical not to call your children names. Sometimes parents get frustrated, and in their frustration, they call their kids things like stupid, idiot, and that is the image they create for themselves. There are so many people that are so successful, but they feel worthless because their parents told them what they are worthless. The key, as I've said in the beginning of this discussion, is to accept our children, even if their personalities are the opposite of yours. When you accept your kids for who they are and you embrace them Insha'Allah, you will see that they will flourish. But if they don't get acceptance, if they don't get acceptance from you, they will seek it elsewhere. This is why you hear so many cases of individuals doing horrible things on the internet. And when you ask them why, they will say, I just wanted to be accepted. I just needed someone to accept me. I just needed that validation. As a parent, if we're not instilling that love, some acceptance, they will seek it elsewhere. As parents, if we're not instilling that love, if we're not instilling that acceptance, they will seek it elsewhere. With these moms that we gave examples of, they all had a beautiful communication style. They built that rapport with their kids, and they were friends with them. Making your kids your friends is so important. And this is something we lose sight of. Yelling, screaming is just going to drive them away. We spoke about this last week. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam taught us that the first 7 years is all about training. They're not even accountable to Allah, yet we are so harsh upon them. Effective communication is using love, is using encouraging statements. Use the I language. When people say you never do this, you feel attacked. And this is a very, interesting example that people have taken out from psychology and even human psychology and how to develop that trust. Maulana, anytime that you want to come in, please do come in. And even from our listeners, if anybody want to add on to what we are saying. So, they say effective communication is using love, using encouraging statements. And I give the example of using the I language. When people say, you never do this, you feel attacked. If someone punches you, you defend yourself. When people communicate, they say you, it becomes like a boxing match. If you say, I feel sad when you do this, instead of saying you only do this, but rather bring it to yourself. I feel sad when you do this. That's not an attack. And we need to draw that distinction in the way we communicate with people. I feel sad when I see you doing this. Now it's not an attack. And it can be an effective way of communication, even in your homes with your partners and your spouses, not necessarily only with your children. And we need to develop and train ourselves so that we are able to address issues in a very more positive way. You have to have eye contact and you have to listen with your ears, your eyes and your heart. It is critical to speak to your kids and not at your kids. It is critical to speak to your kids and not at your kids. What's the difference? At your kids is you're just giving orders and lecturing. And when you talk to them, talk in a way that you wait for a response. It is an exchange. A lot of times we want our kids to share with us, yet we don't share much about ourselves. It is so critical that we share our difficulties and the lesson that we had. A lot of times, parents want to appear perfect. And this is a major issue that lots of parents are unfortunately guilty of. A lot of times, many parents want to appear perfect. It is important to show your kids that there were certain challenges that we had and how we overcame those challenges. to lead by example is another way where you build the trust. Ask your children sometimes what was good about their day or what was not so good. But don't ask what was bad, because then they're searching for the bad. These are all psychological questions and the way we communicate with our kids to develop that self-esteem, to develop that self-worth, to develop that self-respect. Ask your children what was good about the day, what was not so good. But don't say what was bad, because then your child is growing up by thinking about the bad things. They're going to search for the bad. Ask them, how did they add value to their day? How did they benefit someone else's life? Teach them to affect people positively. And also, extremely important, allow your children to express themselves. This is so crucial. You know, there are times in the growing and development of our children where Allah Ta'ala has made it such that in a particular age, children develop within themselves the intrinsic approach of self-worth and protection, preserving their own self-honor. And this is how Allah Ta'ala has built it. And this happens just before the age of maturity. And many a times we may speak to our children, yell at them, and you will see that that self-respect, self-defense mechanism kicks in. And they may say something. And that's the time that we need to be aware of. Many a times what that happens is we feel that they are showing disrespect. But it's not really that. It's that self-defense mechanism within them that Allah Ta'ala has developed in every child kicks in. And we need to be aware and cognizant of the way we address that self-defense mechanism when it kicks in. Because if you're going to yell at them at that moment and scream at them at that moment, you are destroying that self-defense mechanism. And these are very important aspects in building that relationship with our children. And as I said, Maulana, that this is just an introduction to the discussions that we are going to have of building that relationships with our children. Yes, Maulana, if there is anything that you want to add, Maulana.
Ma, we have two comments. The one coming in, such a profound and informative lesson, inshallah. Subhanallah, alhamdulillah. Another one, very informative program. They'll be asking for a podcast later. Inshallah, we'll try to get that podcast out also after the program.
Yes.
Inshallah. Ma, we can now, keeping promises as parents, how important is that you know, when we make a promise, we keep these promises?
Yes, this is important, Maulana. It's important to keep promises that you make to your children. If you repeatedly break your promise to them, they're not going to trust you. If you repeatedly break your promises to them, they are not going to trust you. So even if you can't keep a promise, if you can't keep a promise to them, explain to them why. Don't just break the promise, but have a discussion. Explain to them, yes, I said I made that promise to you, but these are the reasons why I'm unable to fulfill that promise right now. Make sure you don't lie to them, because that can really affect the trust that they have. We see that so many of these exceptional moms, the examples of whom we had given, all of them modeled good behavior. They embodied and modeled good behavior. There is so much hikmah in the 9 months of pregnancy, because you can prepare yourself for this transition and envision that model you want to be. You know, at the time of COVID, Maulana, we spoke about grief. We also spoke about the iddat period and how beneficial iddah period is for a woman. It is in these times that Allah Ta'ala allows us to realign our compass of life. And similarly way, in a very profound and in a very positive way, the period of pregnancy, the 9 months of pregnancy, is so crucial in the development of a mother. It is in the 9 months of pregnancy that a mother can prepare herself for this transition and envision that model that she wants to be. Sometimes we see our kids with bad behavior or bad habits that we don't like. And then we need to look within ourselves. It may be, perhaps they are modeling our own bad habits. We usually get more frustrated by the negative traits that we have within ourselves. So look within and let's correct ourselves first. We as parents need to demonstrate the characteristics that we want our kids to have. So if we want our kids to be righteous, then we need to be righteous ourselves. A very important aspect of parenting is to have the humility and the ability and the capacity of maturity to apologize to your kids when you did something that was unfavorable. Because we all make mistakes and we can take ownership of our mistakes. When we as parents take ownership of our own mistakes, it is so powerful that it builds that ability in the child to be honest and also to acknowledge that they made a mistake sometimes. Show your weakness from time to time. As parents, there is a need for us to apologize when we did wrong. And we need to express and show our own weakness from time to time. All of this needs to be done before we can even start talking about the Islamic identity. Developing the Islamic identity in our children is of paramount importance. But even before that, we start doing all of that. We need to build that rapport. We need to build that confidence. We need to build that trust. And that confidence and trust is built in the way we model ourselves. Because to be Islamic is of utmost importance. And sometimes, as parents, we go straight to that without doing any groundwork. We have to prepare the soil before you start planting the seed. So once you have their trust, once they love you, once you are spending time, quality time with them, and they are heard and appreciated, now they're going to be accepted. They are now going to listen and feel that you want what's best for them. Then you can establish that Islamic identity. Establishing their Islamic identity is really what the whole discussions are going to be in this session, season 3 of building that relationship. All of these moms whose examples we had given did an amazing task. They fulfilled an amazing job. They did not leave it to chance. They did not just make dua. They strove and made so much effort. And what's really critical is to create a positive association to Islam and Deen. To create a positive association with Islam and our Deen. The worst thing that you can do as parents is to make them scared of Allah. And I'm repeating this. It's critical to create a positive, favorable, loving association to Islam and our Deen. And the worst thing that we can do is to scare them. Make your children love this Deen. When we teach about Islam, think about the end result. You know, this aspect of thinking and starting from the end in mind. When we teach about Islam, think about the end result and how you want them to love Islam. It is so critical to take them to successful Islamic events, to meet with Islamic role models. We need to teach them about Muslim heroes. As far as Islamic education is, it has to be at home and in the school. The school only reinforces or should only reinforce what we have established, the foundations in our home. It is essential as parents to ensure that we make primary Islamic education, our makatibs, our Islamic learning, and the Quran, the central focal point of our education. Make sure our kids have the best company. Make sure you have good company. You yourself, as parents, have good company. Because whoever you associate with, you are silently approving their behavior. Whoever you associate with, you are putting a stamp of approval on them. And make sure you are part of an Islamic community. I know we live in times where many a times we are not living in an Islamic community. We must make sure that we always remain part of an Islamic community. I will give an example, Maulana, the daughter of Sa'id ibn Musayyib. I will present the example of the granddaughter of the great companion Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu. The daughter of Sa'id ibn Musayyib is the granddaughter of the great Sahabi Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu had married his daughter to the illustrious Tabi'een, the generation after the companions, Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib. May Allah have mercy on him, rahimahumullah. And from this blessed marriage, the daughter of Abu Huraira marrying Sa'id ibn Musayyib, from this blessed marriage, Allah gifted Sa'id, rahimahumullah, with a pious and knowledgeable daughter. I'm giving this example so that we as mothers should train ourselves in the field of Islamic education. So Sa'id ibn Musayyib, who was married to the daughter of Abu Huraira radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Allah ta'ala gave them through that marriage a very pious and knowledgeable daughter. When the time came to get his daughter married, Sa'id ibn Musayyib chose for her one of his own students called Abdullah. And Abdullah was such a student of Sa'id ibn Musayyib who stood out from the rest and in his sincerity, in seeking knowledge. And this character of Abdullah was clearly visible. And Abdullah's love for knowledge can be seen in the fact that the very next day after his marriage to the daughter of Sa'id ibn Musayyib, he was putting on his cloak to go out of the home. And his new bride asked him, "Where are you going?" He said, "To the assembly of Sa'id to attain knowledge," meaning he is going to learn from the father of his bride, who was a great scholar himself. He said, "I'm going for my lessons." And she said to him, "Sit here. I will teach you the knowledge of Sa'id." Hence, she taught him from her own knowledge. For 1 month, Abdullah did not attend the lessons and the classes of Sa'id ibn Musayyib's circle because the knowledge that this beautiful young girl had learned from her father, which she was passing on to him, was sufficient. So it is important to ask ourselves this question. If Muslim women did possess this kind of knowledge over their husbands today, Maulana, I'm asking this question. If Muslim women did possess this kind of knowledge over their husbands today, would it increase them in respect and obedience towards their husbands? Or would this knowledge become a source of many marital problems? If Muslim women did possess this kind of knowledge over their husbands today, would it increase them in respect and obedience towards their husbands? Or would this knowledge become a source of many marital problems? And we should remember that knowledge should make us humble. The greatness of these women was such that their knowledge only increased them in obedience, increased them in respect for their husbands. And the following statement from the husband of this great female scholar, may Allah have mercy upon her, suffices in us understanding the type of love her husband possessed for her due to her knowledge and obedience. He says, she was among the most beautiful people and the most expert of those who know the Quran by heart, most knowledgeable of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the rights of the husband. Subhanallah. The husband is telling about her, Abdullah, who was the student of Sa'id ibn Musayyib, who was married to the daughter of Sa'id ibn Musayyib, the granddaughter of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who after the day he got married wanted to continue his studying by Sa'id ibn Musayyib, his teacher. And the wife said, let me teach you. And now the husband is talking about his wife. And he says, she was among the most beautiful of people. She was the most learned in the Quran Kareem. She knew the Quran by heart. She was most knowledgeable of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on the rights of the husband. May Allah make the mothers, our sisters and daughters attain such a status in the eyes of their husbands by their knowledge, by their obedience, by their compassionate nature and love for this deen. So this brings us to the end of the introduction, Maulana, of season 3, where we are going to continue, inshallah, discussing the relationship and how to build this positive relationship with our children, inshallah. May Allah guide us. Any questions, any comments, Maulana? We can then end with our today's discussion, inshallah.
Wonderful program, and inshallah we will get a podcast out. We will get a podcast out of this program, and inshallah we'll continue again next week, Wednesday, Maulana.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. From myself, from Mazir Ahmed Ragi, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaykum assalam.
On the first day of Dhul Hijjah,